LEGO's changed the minifigure's head lots of times since 1978, and they never told anyone a single time. But they've also changed things for different countries. Back in 2019, LEGO sold sets that were only available in China. If you lived in the US, the UK, Australia, anywhere that wasn't East Asia, you just couldn't buy them. And the community's reaction was pretty bad. People were genuinely upset, and the crazy part is that LEGO actually listened. By May of 2019, they reversed the policy and started selling the sets to the whole world. But that wasn't the only time China got something nobody else did. In January of 2021, LEGO ran a gift with purchase promotion in their Chinese stores. And to get it, you had to spend the equivalent of over $300 in a single order. Not only was this promotion only in China, but the money threshold was higher than basically anything LEGO was doing in other countries at the same time. So it wasn't just exclusive, it was expensive exclusive. But then there's the story of LEGO Life. LEGO Life was a social media app that LEGO made so people could share their LEGO builds all over the world. In every other country, it's LEGO Life. But in China, the app doesn't even exist. LEGO had to partner with Tencent and build a completely different app from scratch to satisfy China's laws. And LEGO's own CEO confirmed this publicly, so it's 100% true. China having its own version of an app is one thing, but in the 1970s, Italy got its own version of the actual brick. LEGO made a completely separate system called Minitalia, which was only sold in Italy. And if you didn't know what you were looking at, you'd probably think it was a knockoff. The bricks used a different, lower quality plastic than standard LEGO, HIPS instead of ABS. They also had an X-shaped underside instead of the normal tube, and didn't have the LEGO logo on them anywhere. That last part is why so many of them got thrown away. Parents and kids assumed they were cheap fakes and didn't keep them. LEGO made them like this so they could sell bricks to Italy for cheaper, but the result was a version of their own product that looked fake. But Italy isn't even the only country where this happened. Japan had almost the exact same thing happening at the same time. From 1970 to 1978, LEGO made a line called Olo exclusively for the Japanese market. These were pretty much identical to Minitalia bricks, but they used the higher quality ABS plastic instead, and they were reportedly sold in rural areas while regular LEGO was sold in major cities like Tokyo. So Japan had this weird two-tier system, where people who lived in big cities got real LEGO, and people who lived in small towns didn't. But Olo bricks weren't the only thing Japan got that no one else did. From 1997 to 2004, a Japanese candy company called Kabaya partnered with LEGO to sell miniature sets packaged inside boxes of candy. They sold sets from Bionicle, Rock Raiders, Life on Mars, Ninja, Star Wars, and more. And they were all sold in candy wrappers. Some of these even had exclusive content that never showed up anywhere else. The Rock Raiders Kabaya 4-pack came with a Chief minifigure that's never been in any other LEGO product anywhere. The only way to get him was to buy Japanese candy in the early 2000s. But while Japan was getting exclusive candy sets, Europe and America were getting the same sets with completely different lore behind them. In 1999, LEGO released a theme called Slicers in Europe. All 8 characters lived on the same planet, and they were split into different biomes. But in the US and Canada, the exact same sets were sold as Throwbots, and in this version, each character lived on their own separate planet. There were different character names, different backstories, different box art, all of it was different. Fire became Torch, Sub became Scuba, Amazon became Jungle, even the illustrations were different. Enemies in the Throwbots version had their faces and eyes removed compared to the Slicer versions. American and European kids in 1999 were playing with the exact same toys, but at the same time, everything about them was completely different, and no one even knew it. But the 12-volt electric train era is a big one, because American LEGO fans never got it at all, and they're still mad about it. The 12-volt train system ran from 1969 to 1991, and was a Europe exclusive the entire time. Sets like the Intercity Train, the High Speed Express, none of them were ever sold in American stores. The Blue Track version was even more exclusive, only being available in continental Europe, not even the UK or Australia. The reason comes down to LEGO's licensing agreement with Samsonite, who was manufacturing LEGO products for North America at the time. After that arrangement ended in the early 1970s, train sales in the US essentially stopped until 1980, when a limited 4.5 volt line popped up. The 12-volt system, which needed special track conductors, never made the jump. So there's a whole era of LEGO trains that an entire continent just never experienced. But even European buyers weren't all getting the same train experience, because from 1977 through the mid-1980s, LEGO train sets came with sticker sheets that had the logos of different European railway companies. DB for Germany, SNCF for France, OBB for Austria, the list goes on. The box art always showed the German DB stickers applied by default, but if you bought your train set in Finland, you got Finnish railway stickers, Switzerland got Swiss ones, and every other country got their corresponding logo. It's the only time in LEGO history where the decoration of a set changed based on where you bought it. Now, I mentioned Samsonite earlier, and because of them, the Canadian LEGO situation is genuinely its own chapter in LEGO history. From 1962 to 1990, Canadians buying LEGO were buying sets manufactured by Samsonite under a license. And these sets weren't always identical to what the rest of the world was getting. Sometimes the parts were slightly different, sets were in blister packs instead of boxes, and everything had French and English text because of Canadian language laws. So for almost 30 years, Canadian kids were building with a local version of LEGO that was basically the same, but technically different. And because Canada was stuck with Samsonite, it got left behind when updates hit. In 1986, the rest of the world switched from 9-stud road plates to 7-stud road plates with a bike lane. But Canada kept the 9-stud road plates until 1989, 3 years after everyone else switched. Even after the Samsonite situation got sorted out, the US still wasn't getting the same LEGO experience as Europe. From roughly 1970 to 1980, the same exact set was sold with a completely different number in the US versus Europe. The London bus was set 384 in Europe and 760 in the US. Same bus, same parts, different number on the box. LEGO never officially explained why, and it's caused decades of confusion for collectors trying to catalog these things. And at the same time, while the rest of the world was buying Technic, Americans were buying something called Expert Builder. Every other market got the Technic branding, but the US got Expert Builder, and kept it well into the mid-80s before LEGO finally gave up and changed it to Technic. If you grew up in the US during that era and someone mentioned Technic, you might not have even known what they were talking about. But when Bionicle launched in 2001, European sets came with mini CDs that had game content on them. People in America didn't get anything like this for most of the early days of Bionicle. The Toa Metro sets from 2004 all had character-specific promo CDs in their European canisters, with no US equivalent. Since then, collectors have documented the differences at an obsessive level of detail. Different item numbers on European versus US canisters, black and white versus color disc variants, and which specific characters got CDs in which markets. Even the Bionicle collectible mask packs from 2001 were different depending on where you bought them. North America got set 8525, which came in a box, but the rest of the world got set 8530, which came in a poly bag. Same masks, different set numbers, different packaging. It's only right though. After that whole fiasco with the CDs, we needed something cool that other people weren't gonna get. But the changes with Bionicles still aren't done. LEGO managed to tell the same story in the complete wrong order depending on which continent you lived in. The 2005 wave had heroes, the Toa Hortica, and villains, the Viscerac. In North America, the Toa Hortica were introduced in the winter, and the Viscerac came out in the summer. But in Europe and Asia, it was flipped. Viscerac came in winter and Toa Hordica came in summer. So European kids met the villains before they'd been introduced to the heroes they were fighting. At least this time the story was the same. But that same year, the Toa Haga figures, Norik and Iruini, were released in stores in Europe in the winter of 2005. In the US, they were only available as a Walmart exclusive special edition Guardian Toa bonus pack. So one part of the world could walk into any store and buy them, while the other had to go to Walmart specifically or completely miss out. But the thing is, Knights Kingdom 2 did something similar. The action figures, like set 8773, came with game cards in North America. The European version of the same figure came without cards. But then, Target stores in North America got a secret third variant, with 6 cards instead of the standard 3. But at least this was for a random theme no one remembers, right? Well, yes, but LEGO did it with Ninjago too. The Ninjago trading card game launched in 2016 through a company called Blue Ocean, and it's been running across Europe, Brazil, and Singapore ever since. Notice anything? Yeah, it's never been available in the United States or Canada. There are more than 10 series with hundreds of different cards, and American Ninjago fans have just never had access to it. But even within Europe, it wasn't consistent. The UK dropped it after Series 3, while Hungary kept getting English versions even after the UK stopped getting them. Certain limited edition cards were only distributed through specific products in specific countries. It's a whole complicated mess that honestly isn't even worth trying to figure out. But the LEGO architecture theme has a weird origin story that most people haven't heard. When Adam Reed Tucker launched the first architecture sets in 2008, the Sears Tower and the John Hancock Center, they were sold exclusively at the gift shops of those actual buildings in Chicago. You had to physically visit the John Hancock Center or the Sears Tower depending on which set you wanted. That's a level of location-based exclusivity that no one besides LEGO themselves even gets, like the sets in the LEGO house. And speaking of LEGO house, during COVID, LEGO put some of the house sets for sale online, but for some reason they weren't available for everyone. The architecture set was available across Europe. The Tree of Creativity and the Dinosaurs sets were only in Denmark, the UK, and Ireland, because those were the only countries where the packaging met local regulation requirements. And get this, the US and Australia got nothing. Nothing? This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to buy sets for retail price online that you can only get in person in one place. And for some reason, LEGO left out 2 gigantic markets. The problem is, this kind of thing goes all the way back to 1967. Set 080 was a town and train hybrid set that you could buy at any regular toy store in Europe. But in the US, the same exact set was sold exclusively at FAO Schwarz, the most expensive luxury toy store in America at the time. They even changed the name to the Ambassador set, when literally everything about them was the same. But in America, you had to be rich to buy it. And then there's the one that genuinely baffles people when they hear it. The LEGO Architecture White House set, released in 2020, launched in Europe and Asia before it was released in America. A set of the literal White House was available in Germany 2 months before you could buy it in the States. And apparently the reason was because factories in Mexico were closing down due to COVID. Honestly, I hate how good of an excuse this is, because it really does make sense. But the Brick Architect said it best. It was a misguided decision to release a model featuring an iconic US landmark to a domestic audience 2 months later than it was released in Europe and Asia. But to finish the video, let me tell you about the Royal Guard minifigure. I think we can all agree that this is a cool minifigure, but if you want it, you have to go to Hamley's toy store in London to buy it. You literally can't get it anywhere else in the world unless you pay the resale price. Oh, and another thing, it hasn't been sold there since 2018, so you have to buy resale whether you like it or not. But exclusive minifigures are one thing. What's even worse is when LEGO makes a change that breaks a set you already own. Back in 2010, LEGO released the Grand Emporium set in the modular buildings theme, but during the production run, they changed the mold for a certain flower piece, and they switched it from a hollow stud to a solid one. Now, on the surface, this seems like a tiny change that wouldn't matter, but here's the problem. The instructions for the Grand Emporium required attaching this flower by putting a bar through the hollow stud. So when people bought newer copies of the set and got the updated solid version, they physically could not complete the build. The piece just didn't work the way the instructions said it should. LEGO ended up shipping out the older flower pieces to people who contacted them and complained, but they never made any kind of public announcement about it. And that's not the only piece that got quietly changed without anyone being told. The 1x2 jumper plate, which is legitimately one of the most used pieces in all of LEGO, has been redesigned twice over the years. In 2004, they added a groove to it. Then in 2010, they replaced the pin on the underside with a stud holder. This second change completely altered how the piece connected to other bricks. So if you were using building techniques from before 2010, they just didn't work the same way on newer jumper plates. And LEGO never told anyone this was happening. Builders just had to figure it out through trial and error. But jumper plates aren't the only thing that got updated in secret. The stud on top of minifigures' heads has actually been changed 3 separate times. It started as a solid stud, then became a blocked hollow stud in 1993, and then got changed again to a concave stud around 2006. These changes affect how accessories, hairpieces, and hats attach to it, and they also affect how certain building techniques work when you're using heads as connection points. The really crazy part, though, is that all 3 versions technically use the same mold in LEGO's system, which makes tracking these changes super difficult. And speaking of minifigure heads, you might not have realized that the classic smiley face from back in the day has been slowly retired over the years. If you grew up in the early 2000s like me, you wouldn't have noticed at all, since the popular themes were all licensed, and LEGO was using custom faceplates for basically every minifigure. But just 15 years earlier, this faceplate was the only thing you saw. The biggest giveaway that the classic smiley was being phased out was when LEGO released the Downtown Diner set in 2018. When it got announced the year before, hardcore fans noticed that the minifigures all had these brand new faceplates with white in their eyes. AFL Wells talked about it so much online that LEGO made an official statement about the new faceplates. They basically said that they'd been upping the quality of the modular buildings theme a lot over the last 10 years, so they thought it was finally time for the minifigures to get an upgrade too. I'm not exactly sure where LEGO said this, but you can find it on multiple review websites, so it's definitely legit. But not every minifigure head change was about something retiring. The first double-sided minifigure head, which is now standard in basically every theme, was introduced with absolutely no announcement all the way back in 2001. Professor Quirrell from the Harry Potter theme had Voldemort's face printed on the back of his head, and that was the very first time LEGO ever made a double-sided head. Fans just bought the set, built the minifigure, and noticed when they happened to turn the head around. But now, let me show you a change that happened in the middle of a production run and completely changed what minifigure was inside a certain set. In 2017, LEGO released the Resistance Bomber set from Star Wars: The Last Jedi. It came with a generic minifigure literally just called Resistance Bomber Pilot, who was a random minifigure in pilot gear. But when The Last Jedi actually came out, fans who saw the movie realized that the pilot who flew that specific bomber was a character named Finch Dallow. And when people compared LEGO's minifigure to Finch, they looked nothing alike. So LEGO went back and redesigned the entire minifigure mid-production run. They updated the box art, the instructions, and started shipping the new version in 2019. But of course, they never made an announcement about this. They just started shipping the new version. So depending on exactly when you bought this set, you got a completely different minifigure inside the box. The craziest part though is that the Finch Dallow minifig sells for over $1,300 on the aftermarket. But now let me show you a minifigure change that only happened because LEGO didn't have the right colors at first. In 2001, when the first wave of Harry Potter sets came out, LEGO only had classic yellow for minifigure skin tones. But Professor Snape was specifically described in the books as being pale, and obviously yellow didn't really capture that. So they decided to give him a fluorescent green head because that was the closest color they had at the time. And he actually stayed green for years. Even after LEGO started giving other characters realistic skin tones in 2004, Snape was still walking around with a green head for a while. Eventually, they did fix it and gave him a pale skin tone. But for a while there, Snape looked absolutely ridiculous. And speaking of Harry Potter characters getting changed, Dumbledore's robes have been changed so many different times that it's genuinely hard to keep track of all the versions. In the actual movies, Dumbledore's signature look is deep purple robes, and LEGO's first version of him in 2001 did use purple, but then they just kept changing it for some reason. He showed up in pink robes for the Prisoner of Azkaban sets, then he had bright blue robes for the Goblet of Fire wave, then in 2018, when they rebooted the theme, he got light blue robes with silver accents. And here's the weird part about all this. The blue robes are actually what Dumbledore wears in the original books, not in the movies. So LEGO kept giving him the book-accurate colors for sets that were supposed to be based on the movies. Even the LEGO Harry Potter video game always showed him wearing purple robes in all the cutscenes. But Harry Potter isn't the only licensed theme LEGO made changes to. The Simpsons Quickie Mart set from 2015 is missing one of the most iconic things from the entire show: Duff beer. This beer is absolutely everywhere in The Simpsons. It's always on the shelves every time the Quickie Mart is on screen. And it's so iconic that it even had its own theme park ride. But when you look at LEGO's Quickie Mart set, it has a full interior with shelves and products with no Duff beer anywhere. Instead, all the fridges are stocked with bottles of Buzz Cola, which is a fake soda from the show. And LEGO's alcohol policy is the exact reason why Moe's Tavern has never been made as an official set, even though it's one of the most iconic spots in The Simpsons. In a 2014 interview with Collider, LEGO's VP of Design, Matthew James Ashton, directly said, "We try to avoid anything alcohol related within our products, especially targeting kids. But LEGO's censorship doesn't stop with alcohol. They also have a strict no smoking policy." The Jurassic Park T-Rex Rampage set from 2019 was a massive set that cost $250, and one of the minifigures in it was Ray Arnold, the character played by Sam L. Jackson. In the original movie, Ray Arnold has a cigarette in his mouth in pretty much every scene he's in. It's genuinely part of his identity as a character. But when LEGO made his minifigure, they obviously left it out. The Brick Fans review of the set directly noted, one thing that is missing from the printing is his cigarette. So people definitely noticed. But this exact same thing happened with the X-Files set too. There's a character in the X-Files literally called the Cigarette Smoking Man. His entire name is based on the fact that he chain smokes throughout the entire series. When the X-Files set passed a review on LEGO Ideas, the designer told Gold Derby in an interview that he intentionally left out cigarettes from the design. He said, "I was cautious to include cigarettes or anything smoking related, and specifically didn't include his trademark pack of Morley cigarettes." But not only did they leave them out, they also changed the character's name to the Syndicate Leader on the packaging to avoid even using a name that references smoking. Obviously, LEGO has a very strict policy when it comes to this stuff. But now, let me show you something that got censored for a completely different reason. The Stranger Things theme is one of LEGO's most popular themes right now, and obviously Eleven's nosebleed is one of the most iconic things in the entire show. But when LEGO made her minifigure for the Upside Down set in 2019, they matched every detail to her disguise in Season 1, besides her nosebleed. A commenter on Brickset's review specifically called this the biggest miss of the set. The ironic part though is that LEGO made a Demogorgon headpiece with its mouth open, which is way scarier than a little nosebleed. But some of the weirdest censorship happens in the LEGO video games. In the movie Avengers Age of Ultron, Quicksilver sacrifices himself by taking a bunch of bullets for Hawkeye, and he dies from his injuries. It's a super serious and tragic death scene, But in the LEGO Marvel's Avengers video game, this scene plays out completely differently. Quicksilver gets pelted with ice cream cones instead of bullets and falls over onto the ground. And if you look closely, he's still breathing while he's lying there. Brickopedia calls this the most infamous censor death in the entire game, which makes sense because of how sad it was in the movies. LEGO does stuff like this all the time though. In LEGO Indiana Jones: The Original Adventures from 2008, a major scene from the Temple of Doom just got completely removed. In the movie, the villain Mola Ram rips a man's heart directly out of his chest while he's fully alive and conscious, and then lowers him into a lava pit to die. This scene was so disturbing that when the movie came out, it literally helped create the PG-13 rating. But in the Original Adventures video game, the heart sacrifice ritual is just gone. It doesn't even happen. There are a lot of ways for LEGO to censor different things in video games. I mean, they do it all the time in cutscenes, but I guess this one was just too far gone. However, the sequel game, LEGO Indiana Jones 2: The Adventure Continues, censored stuff in a way more creative and hilarious way. In Raiders of the Lost Ark, the scene where the villains open the Ark of the Covenant is absolutely terrifying. Faces melt off, heads explode, and spoiler alert, literally everyone dies. But in LEGO Indiana Jones 2, when the bad guys open the Ark, something completely different happens. A disco ball drops out of nowhere. Then dance music starts playing, and all the enemy soldiers start dancing to the music. Then, while they're dancing, the true power of the Ark activates and kills all of them with electrocution. So even though the scene did technically get censored, everyone still died anyway. I guess LEGO figured electrocution was more PG friendly. But sometimes LEGO gets lucky, and things they'd usually have to censor themselves. Here's what I mean. In LEGO Marvel Superheroes, one of the characters you can unlock is Ghost Rider. In the comics, this guy is an absolute demon, literally. He's a demon that bonded to a human soul. This obviously makes for a pretty scary looking character, one that LEGO might not want to show in all his glory. But luckily for them, he just doesn't look scary as a minifigure. When LEGO made him for the game, they included every detail: the skull, the outfit, the fire around his head, but he's nowhere near as scary as he is in the comics. However, there's one character in LEGO video games who's been censored more than anyone: Deadpool. Watch Mojo literally lists him as the #1 most censored character across every LEGO Marvel video game. As a character, Deadpool is defined by graphic violence, adult jokes, and R-rated comedy. But in LEGO Marvel Superheroes, he's basically just a harmless comedian who takes you through bonus side missions in the game. All the graphic violence is gone, all the adult humor is gone, all the fourth wall breaks are toned down to a kid-friendly joke. He's a complete shell of his former self. And obviously, this all makes sense. I mean, there's no way LEGO would add all of that stuff to a kid's game. Now, LEGO censoring stuff in their games is one thing, but let me tell you about something that genuinely made people angry back in 2011. LEGO used to sell these magnet sets where you could stick minifigures to your fridge or locker. And the cool part was that you could actually remove the minifigure from the magnetic base. So if you wanted to collect rare minifigures, you could just buy the magnet set and pop them off. It was perfect. But then in 2011, LEGO started permanently gluing all of the minifigures to their bases. And I'm not just talking about a little bit of glue. They were gluing the torsos to the legs too, so you literally couldn't take them apart at all. Fans were furious, and I mean, can you blame them? The whole point of buying these was to get the minifigures, and now they were just stuck to a magnet forever. The reason this happened was apparently due to licensing issues with Star Wars, which doesn't make it any less frustrating. But let me show you something super sick that's been gone for way longer. From 1986 to 1998, LEGO had this thing called the 9-volt system, and it was honestly kind of insane. You'd have a battery box and then these special conductive bricks that had metal lining inside of them. And when you connected them all together, they'd make an actual circuit. No wires, no complicated setup, just bricks that conducted electricity. And then you could add light bricks or sound bricks to make sirens, lights, and sounds. The problem was that these systems were bulky and complicated, especially for younger kids, so LEGO discontinued them. But here's the thing, they actually tried a simpler version back in 2019 with some city sets, and people loved it. It just goes to show that sometimes the old features really were better, even if they were more complex. Now, if you've been building LEGO for a while, you probably remember those raised base plates that used to come with certain sets. I'm talking about the ones with built-in terrain, craters, road patterns, all of that. Castle sets had base plates with rocky textures, city sets had roads already printed on them, and space sets had those awesome crater base plates that you could use as ramps. They gave your builds instant scale and made everything feel more complete right out of the box. But LEGO phased them out because of cost, packaging, size, and the fact that they were pretty fragile and could crack if you weren't careful. Now we're stuck with either flat plates or having to build roads ourselves, which takes way more time and pieces. But the worst part? Those old crater base plates from Classic Space sell for like $35 to $40 each on the secondhand market. So even if you wanted in on the action, you'd have to pay a lot of money. Speaking of classic themes, let me tell you about something in the castle theme that gave it way more life. LEGO used to include these massive pre-molded pieces that let you build rock formations really easily. People called them burps, which stands for big, ugly rock pieces. And even though the name sounds bad, they were actually super useful and loved. You could snap them together and have a full wall around your castle in minutes, instead of spending an hour building it brick by brick. But LEGO discontinued them because they wanted to shift toward fully brick-built structures for better play value. And I get it, building everything from scratch does give you more flexibility and lets you customize your builds. But at the same time, those burps were iconic, and a lot of people miss being able to throw together a castle that quickly. But castle wasn't the only theme that lost something important. Pirate ships used to come with real fabric sails that had printed designs on them, and they made the ships feel so much more authentic and premium. Like, you'd open the box and see this actual cloth sail, and it just felt special. But these were gradually replaced with plastic sails or brick-built alternatives, and honestly, they're just not the same. The original cloth sails are now expensive collector's items, and some fans have even started making DIY replacements because they miss them so much and can't afford the real ones. I don't know about you, but I'd rather have a real fabric sail than a plastic one any day of the week. Going back to castle for a minute though, there's one more thing I have to mention. These large round shields with a single center stud that you'd see in sets like the 6030 catapult were fan favorites for castle builds. They were simple, they looked great, and you could attach them to minifigures or build them into walls, but they were phased out for more complex printed designs or just regular shields. And sure, the new shields have more detail, but there was something really satisfying about those simple round shields that you just don't get anymore. Oh, and speaking of that catapult set, let me tell you about another thing that's changed. Old LEGO castle sets had functional catapults that could fling projectiles across an entire room. The catapult set from 1984 had this powerful Technic-based mechanism that could launch things with serious force. But modern catapults are way weaker, or they've been replaced by stud shooters, which are fine, I guess, but they're just not as satisfying. There's something about pulling back a catapult arm and watching something fly across the room that stud shooters just can't replicate. But at least catapults are still around in some way. Flick fire missiles, on the other hand, are basically gone. These were introduced in 2006, and they were super simple. You would just flick them with your finger, and they'd shoot out. They weren't as reliable as spring-loaded shooters, but they were way more fun to use. While they're still technically available in some sets, they've mostly been replaced by those spring-loaded shooters and stud shooters, since they're more consistent. Sometimes I feel like LEGO prioritizes function over fun, and this is a perfect example of that. Now, this next feature being removed does kind of make sense, but is still definitely sad. LEGO trains used to connect with magnetic couplers, which was awesome because you could easily attach and detach cars. But small magnets became a safety hazard, especially for younger kids who might swallow them. So in 2005, LEGO introduced this huge sealed buffer beam to keep magnets in trains to make them safer. And now you have to use different connection methods that just aren't as convenient. I totally understand why they did it, but man, those magnetic couplers were so easy to use. But if you think losing train magnets is bad, let me tell you about something that's even worse. From 1987 to 1994, LEGO made 3 legendary monorail sets with futuristic elevated trains and automatic switching tracks. These things were incredible, and people absolutely loved them. But here's the thing. Single pieces of track now sell for $20 or more on the secondhand market, and LEGO has said that the molds are gone and they won't be coming back, despite massive demand. There have been multiple LEGO Ideas projects trying to bring the monorail back, and people have even started 3D printing replacement tracks because the demand is so high. But LEGO just won't do it, and honestly, it's one of the most requested features that LEGO refuses to bring back. But another one is the power function system. This ran from 2007 to 2018, and it was super reliable and standardized. You had motors, lights, and simple plug-and-play connectors that just worked. But it got replaced by Powered Up in 2018, which uses Bluetooth and is supposedly more advanced. The problem is that Powered Up is way more expensive and way more complex to set up. And sure, Bluetooth is cool and all, but sometimes you just want something simple that works without having to connect it to an app or worry about battery life. Power Functions was perfect for that, and a lot of people still prefer it over Powered Up, but at least motors are still around, because pneumatic systems, on the other hand, are basically extinct. LEGO Technic used to have working pneumatic systems with air pumps, cylinders, and hoses that created realistic hydraulic motion. There were 2 generations of this, Generation 1 from 1984 to 1989, and Generation 2 from 1989 and onwards. These systems offered incredible play features and made Technic sets feel like real machinery, but they're rarely included in modern Technic sets anymore because they're too expensive to produce. And I get it, pneumatics are complicated and add a lot to the cost of a set, but man, those old Technic sets with pneumatics were something special. But while we're talking about complex systems that are basically gone, let me show you the 12-volt train system that ended in 1991. This system had remote-controlled signals, points, and lights that you could automate. When LEGO switched to 9-volt trains, most of these electronic accessories were lost. Fans still miss the advanced automation that the 12-volt system offered, because it let you set up really complex train layouts that could run themselves. Now, you either have to use third-party products or just accept that your trains won't be as automated as they used to be. But let's move away from trains and talk about Star Wars for a second. Back in 2005, LEGO released the Ultimate Lightsaber Duel set, and it included battery-powered glowing lightsabers that you could activate by pressing the minifigure's head. How cool is that? You'd press down on the head and the lightsaber would actually light up, but they were discontinued, mostly because they only had a 3-hour battery life. And honestly, that makes a lot of sense. But Star Wars wasn't the only theme with light-up pieces. The Toa Inika sets from Bionicle in 2006 had light-up weapons with LEDs built in. You could press a button and the weapon would glow, and it was incredibly cool. But just like those lightsabers, these were discontinued due to battery shipping and cost issues. Bionicle fans still talk about how awesome these sets were, specifically because of those light-up weapons, and it's a shame that feature never came back. But if you think light-up weapons are cool, let me tell you about Exoforce sets from 2006 to 2008. These sets included light bricks connected to fiber optic cables that make the cockpits of mechs glow. It gave them this realistic powered-up look that made them feel like they were actually running on energy. Modern mech sets don't have anything like this, and honestly, they feel a lot less impressive because of it. The fiber optics made Exoforce mechs stand out, and it's a feature that I wish LEGO would bring back for modern mech themes. But here's a light and sound brick that's become legendary for a different reason. The 2009 Grand Carousel set included a special sound brick that plays carousel music, and it was only used in that one set. Because of this, the brick sells for insanely high prices on Bricklink, and collectors go crazy trying to find one. It's one of those pieces that became valuable specifically because it's so rare and unique, and you can't get it anywhere else. But now, let me tell you about a theme that completely relied on technology and then lost everything when that technology was shut down. The Hidden Side theme ran from 2019 to 2020, and the sets were designed with rotating elements and colorful pieces that you were supposed to to scan with an AR app for ghost hunting gameplay. The sets themselves were cool builds, but the whole gimmick was the app, and in 2023, LEGO discontinued it, which means all that interactive functionality is just gone forever. If you buy a Hidden Side set now, you're only getting half the experience because the AR gameplay is entirely inaccessible. Another theme that had something similar happen is the Nexo Knights theme. From 2016 to 2018, the sets had collectible power shield tiles that worked with an app, but since that app is completely gone now, there's no way to use them again. Around 3 years ago, someone on Reddit noticed that it got taken off the App Store. So I'm not exactly sure when the app got taken down, but I know for sure it's gone forever. Clearly, LEGO has a lot of discontinued tech features, but this next one made people more upset than ever before. LEGO Mindstorms was a programmable robotics platform that taught kids coding and engineering for decades. It was incredible for education, and hobbyists loved it because you could build custom robots and program them to do basically anything. But in 2022, LEGO discontinued Mindstorms in favor of Spike Prime, which is more education-focused and less flexible for custom designs. Spike Prime is fine for classrooms, but hobbyists really miss Mindstorms because it gave you way more freedom to experiment and build whatever you wanted. But here's something that's happening right now that a lot of people are worried about. LEGO is actively trying to phase out paper instructions and move everything over to digital-only manuals. And to make things worse, they've already removed artwork from instruction covers, so now they're just generic white backgrounds instead of having cool themed artwork. Fans want physical manuals because it lets them disconnect from screens while building, and the artwork on the covers used to be part of the excitement of opening a new set. Now everything looks generic and boring, and if LEGO goes fully digital, that physical experience is just gone. But that isn't all, because LEGO's also trying to transition from plastic bags to paper bags. The new paper bags are just plain white with faint brick patterns on them. You can't see through them like you can with the plastic bags, so there's no more excitement of seeing all the colors through the bags when you open the box. But I'm still not done, because there's another thing that made opening sets less exciting, but this one happened a long time ago. LEGO used to include these small catalogs inside sets that showed you other sets in the theme or upcoming releases. You'd finish building your set, and then you could flip through the catalog and see all the other cool stuff you could get. But now it's mostly just QR codes or nothing at all, and honestly, it's not the same. I never even got one of these catalogs in a set. This is something that's been gone for a while, but I really wish they'd bring them back. But which removed feature do you miss the most? Be sure to let me know down in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe.